said, he's like, but I heard IT people and tables. The IT guy responded, and he said, after. Are you, what?
I promise I won't be scary.
Verified, can you do this, 3 or 4 things, verified that. Mine either, I go 45 minutes.
If you're comfortable back there, you can stay there, but I feel like there's like all this space.
That's what's your reason.
Nobody has to come here, cause I'm gonna be like this. So nobody has to come right here and what? Wait, you got plugging this bench?
What?
You're got the rail you?
No, it doesn't.
Amy, have you met Alex? Over here, this is Alex.
Hello.
And this is Wade.
Hello,
Hi.
Wade, nice to meet you.
And you've met Russie and Sean, right?
Yes.
Just right now?
Just a minute.
Alex is nicer than she looks, just so you know.
Oh,
Shut her, yeah.
Like, oh, shiny, like,
That's probably the truth, actually.
Alex is nicer than she looks.
Russie, you dropped something.
I think I'm doing this.
Hi, Marvel.
The fact
Hello.
that
I.
We were on the Zoom. I don't know what it was.
But I noticed like a drop. I don't know what this
We
is.
were on that
Drop
Zoom
off on people
training
telling me or
last week.
commenting on how like I have audio.
And I
but
was
it's
like-
just-
I was like,
Mhm.
Alex, you don't have to act
Yeah, I don't get
excited
that.
to be here. I'm like, you got RBF, girl. She's like,
Yeah.
I can look like, I have,
You know, I don't scowl.
I've been.
at least you know it's not true, whatever.
Well, now it's not bad. My face is just not frozen anymore.
Yeah.
We were just
I
talking.
thought it was a business expense. I feel like I should be able to start writing it off.
Well,
If there, you know, insurance is covering it now, if you get it for headache, insurance will cover it. Well, I wonder if you could just like go to the doctor and like get your temples done, but then also be like.
A little bit, right? Feel like she writes on this, right? For here.
What were we
for
watching?
job security.
Alex. Zoom are we on?
Are you feeling? Yeah.
What Zoom? No, when we were doing the Zoom thing and I told you about your RBF, what was it?
It's like. I use Rose Ladder.
Agent financial.
Oh. And then I was telling her about her RBF and I'm like, messaging back and I was like, bro, you see homeboy in the corner picking his nose? Like, it was like going to him, but his camera on like this. He went back for seconds and thirds.
Yours for like
It was bad.
this hand surgeon, I think, I guess.
Wesley,
Yes,
how are you?
good. Did you see?
So she's got a connection. to
Did I
the-
see?
Many part,
No, which
So
one's
she
yours?
just does it on.
the
so I
black
know that she's
and
doing it
bluish color.
But she's good at, so she does.
Is it nice?
Yeah, it's the Onyx package, so it's the one that's got the turbo. So hopefully I don't get any tickets.
Good luck with that.
I know.
Hi, guys. Hello. Sorry, I should have followed up. I didn't know Chris was gonna have an appointment. I asked him to print this morning. Can I help you? I just was gonna print off, I have these, but we just print off. You have a form when we pulled up. I was gonna print off this one from. But these ones, but I can't figure out like whatever pages they are. Okay, so we're gonna get started. But first I need to know who actually, because this class is a choose your own adventure. And it can go one of two ways. So we can either dive more into the actual 411, what it is, and how we can utilize it at a higher level, or we can mastermind around what challenges you're having. So who's actually right now consistently using a 411? Two? Okay.
And in.
She's like, I sat with you.
And in coaching,
Okay.
they have started, but they're not.
Who can tell me what is a 411, first of all?
For a year.
It's your 1 year, 1 month, 4 week. What?
Yes. So we say 411, but really when you see it, it's gonna be one annual goal. I feel like that only has one end.
No.
One, why does that look weird? One monthly goal and then 4 leisures.
Yeah.
So the 411 back in the old days. I mean, have different options. So back in the old days, there was a thing that if you didn't know something, you could dial 411 on your landline and it would actually give you information.
It's still there apparently. My
Is it?
father-in-law did it on my thing. I got charged like $5. We're like, what is wrong with that? Oh, yeah.
So that's what the 411 stands for, and really you should have your annual goals set already. And then essentially what the 411 is gonna do is every month, you're gonna say, what are the most important pieces of me, what is the most important things that I need to do this month in order to move myself forward for my annual goal? And then each week, it's what should I do this week in order to move myself forward for my monthly goal, to move myself forward for my annual. Okay, so that's what the 411 is. So I want to dive a little bit into why behind the 411, just because we only have a couple people doing it. And then from there, we're going to just kind of brainstorm a little bit on how you can utilize the 411 at a higher level. Because here's what I find pretty frequently with the 411. People will start working off of a 411 and we're really dialed in right at first, but this is kind of with every habit, right? So we're really dialed in at first and we're like, I'm gonna crush this. I'm gonna do only the things on my list this week. I'm gonna get everything done. And then we start to lose momentum as we go through the 411. Why? Because the things on our list are sometimes not the things we actually want to be doing. So when you're thinking of your weekly list, a couple things you need to remember. This is not going to be your to-do list. This is your must-do list. So on your annual goals on the top, you guys have two different versions of this. The one that is like a little worksheet looking page, that one is actually in KW Connect. And they also have an online version in KW Connect. This one is just a smaller little one sheet that I have an Excel spreadsheet of, if you guys want me to share it with you. This is the one that my old coach used to have us fill out because it's just easy and it's Excel and you can just go in and type it all in. But if you notice under your annual goals, so this is your 1-year goal. So there's 3 different categories in here: professional, personal, and money. Now, why would we have these all on the same we should be putting goals all around our annual, right, for all of those areas. If you're only doing your job or your professional or your business, it's out of balance. We should be looking to say, what are the goals we're trying to achieve in our personal life too, and have those things identified. Now, this gives you space to write 5. I think up here it only gives you 2 or 1. So your annual goal, you should really have, I would say, 2 to maximum 5 things that you really need to accomplish that year. And that's going to stay at the top of this. It's not going to change at all. It's always going to stay the same because your annual goal remains the same, right? We set it in whenever. The only time that this would ever adjust is like when you're reviewing, say we just did our mid-year review, when you're reviewing your annual goals and something significant happened that warranted a change in your goals, up or down, right? Like a good example of this is, let's say in this money category or finances, whatever it's personal finance on that page. Let's say in that one, you guys had a goal to save $1,000 a month. And so you were like, okay, every month I'm gonna save $1,000. And so that would be $12,000 would be your annual goal. Then your monthly goal would be $1,000 a month. And then each week, what would that look like? So every week, if you needed to save $1,000, how much would you have to save and put into your savings account every week, sorry. $250, right? So we're just gonna do a little example of this with we were on personal finance and our annual goal was that we were gonna save $12,000. We want $12,000 in savings by the end of the year. Then our monthly goal for that, just for demonstration purposes, and I'm gonna tell you, we'll get a little more specific with it, would be $1,000 a month in savings. And then weekly, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, 250, 250, 250. Which would equal 1,000, right? Now, what if halfway through the year, when we're doing our mid-year review, what if something pops up that we had a really great opportunity for, like an investment property or something like that, that we said, ooh, my goal was to save $12,000 this year, which I'm using just really easy numbers because that makes sense.
But my goal was to save $12,000 this year. I actually have an opportunity to invest in something that's gonna put me further ahead in the long run, and it's on my someday goals. Would it maybe warrant us not saving the money and putting that into an investment instead? Yeah, right, because we now know something that we didn't know when we first made that goal. So things like that come along, that's the only time you're really ever gonna change your annual goal. In the 4-in-1 that we use as an office, it actually just auto-populates across all 12 months our annual goals. So the only time you would change those is if something happened that would warrant a change in your goals. That could be that you've already hit your goal by the middle of the year, so you need to increase some goals. That might be that you, with the knowledge you have now, there's no way you're gonna be able to hit that, so you're making an adjustment in your goal mid-year. So that's the only time you can really adjust your goals. Monthly, so sometimes the biggest mistake I see in 411 is when someone goes through, because if you look at your page, you have 4 weeks across here. This should have. This, if it continued, would have 4 weeks. Okay, I should probably just pull it up. But you'd have 4 weeks that you're gonna be putting things in every week. The most common thing that I see, say that this is, we're in August, so let's say this was our August 411.
We're built up for you.
Yeah, well, you didn't pull one up that I, so that, I feel like it's a better example on the screen. And then each week, a lot of times, the first time someone starts working with the 411, all of these goals, all across the whole time, will be filled out. So this is what it looks like on August 1st. What's the problem with this?
Sometimes your goals change throughout the week.
Right, or,
Sometimes you have a week where you have like a car expense or something and you can't. put money into savings, or maybe you're gonna get a bonus. Week 3 and you can put more.
right, yeah. So basically what you're seeing here is like, you have this where it says, okay, well, guess what? Oh, it's probably this one, right? No, that's not it.
Do you want? the
Chris
one
has
for-
one. Oh, just use this template right here.
This one?
Fourth one down.
This one?
That one's great. Is this my drive? Did I not log out?
Oh, this is it, yeah.
I should probably log out of it.
Same one.
That's not the one I really want.
What one do you want?
Go back to the UHS or UAS one, I think. Fourth one down, right there.
Yeah, template. Okay, this is the one I like.
Yeah, me too.
Now, this is an old. Is there one from Chris that's 2023, not a 2021? And remind me to log out. I forgot I logged in for, just search 2021 or 2023 411. Very good.
From Chris.
It's from Chris. Make sure that I'm looking for my own notes.
Where do you go to yours? Early.
So let me start summing up. There's no something like something. It should just pull up a 401. Not GPS, it's not gonna be there.
I mean, it's the same template, it's just a different year. It should be
Yeah,
better,
that's
right?
fine. The only thing that I liked about ours is because it shows you all the way across. It shows all the years. That's my personal one, so. Wow.
Well, is it that 2022 one? Right. No, I'm
No,
higher.
that's Chris's personal
Oh,
one.
that's his personal one.
We can just show them with the,
Just pull up
Just
the
the-
2021, that's fine. Not that one, that one, that one. So we can send you one of these. The difference will be is that every single month is across the bottom. So the thing I like about that is because you really should be, and if we added it, there's tabs all the way across. We added in a quarterly button because I really do believe you should have a quarterly focus each month too. So essentially what you would do with the 401 is you're gonna take your annual goals, you're gonna say, for this quarter, I need to do this. Now, with the saving money example, I'm gonna use this example just for a minute and then we'll jump into like business example of it. But for saving money example, in the first quarter, we may be a better focus to be able to financially save money and our monthly goals might be higher. So the reason that you don't just go through and fill in everything all at once, and the reason you don't just take your annual goal and divide it by 12 at the beginning of the year and just go, boop, there it is, that might be a good guideline for you. But every month kind of changes and shifts, and so we need to be more specific with what we're actually doing. So the first quarter of the year, we may actually have a goal. If our goal was to save $12,000 this year, just passively put it away, sit it in a savings account. The first quarter of the year, we may want to save, we may know that fourth quarter for us might be a little bit slower. So in the first quarter, we may say, hey, we actually need to save $5,000 in Q1. And then that would be what's 5,000 divided by 3. Can we do the math for me? Like 1,500? It's gonna be a weird number.
1666.
1666 a month. And then that would change our weekly goals, right? Because then that's gonna be divided into 4 here too. But we don't have all the rest of the weeks filled out, we just have week 1. So we have week 1 filled out here. So if this was our thing, we would say, okay, we have the goal of putting $12,000 in savings. That's gonna be right here underneath our financial goal. For the quarter, we wanna save $5,000. That means this month, we need to save $1,666, which means this week, as our goal, we should be saving how much? Let's just say 420 around that. We have to save $420 this week. Okay, so we would walk into this week. Now, I would say this one's probably a little bit rudiment, like elementary, because this would be like, we would just be adding some pretty basic things. Like if we know we had closings coming up this week, if we had a check coming, if we were gonna sell something to come up with the money, whatever it is, it's gonna be right here. So at the end of next week though, I can't just put 420 all across here. Because what happens if week 1, we don't actually save $420?
I shared 2 years is 2022.
It's the same.
Since 2022.
It was the same.
You have the tab here. So the nice thing about this one is once you put in annual goals, it will populate those across all 12 months. When you put in quarterly goals, it will calculate them January through March. Then in April, you'll put in new ones, it'll calculate them again, and then again and again. So that is how you're gonna use your 401. So you're doing an annual goal, monthly goal, weekly goal. Couple of things to remember. So the annual goal is never gonna change. Each month, when you flip from January to February to March, your quarterly goal also should not change, right? And remember, we're not putting every single thing we want to happen in that quarter. We're just putting the most important. If you think of this as a funnel working backwards, and you say, okay, actually it would work this way, but you say, okay, if our annual goal is this, then what do we need to funnel it down to in the quarter, in the month, and then each week, what is very most important for us to do that's gonna push us forward to our monthly goal, our quarterly goal, our annual goal. Okay, so that is the idea of the 411. A couple of, this is really supposed to be like a working in the 411, so I wanna talk about questions too, but a couple of best practices with the 411 is, like I said, we can't fill out, if we scroll down a little bit. If we scroll down and you see how these dates are populated, for financial, for example, I can't fill out $420 every week for the rest of the month. Because I don't know what's gonna happen this week. I know what my intentions are, but you have to be able to evaluate this at the end of the week to say, did I hit my goal? What if I only saved $350 this week?
Then you're gonna have to add 70 to the next, one of your next weeks.
Right, I forgot to add 70 here and say, okay, well, next week now I gotta save 490. Or I have to go, well, I don't think this is realistic next week, so I'm gonna take the 70 that I owe myself, and I'm gonna increase this to 450, which still leaves me $40 short in the coming weeks. Right, and then in this week, we would evaluate it, say, did we actually save this? Maybe we saved 470, and then we move it forward, and then each week we're evaluating it, okay? So the money one is a simple one just because it's easy to just break it down like that, but when you're thinking through your goals, your annual goal may be X amount of transactions, Okay, so let's say our annual goal is 120 transactions. The most common thing everybody wants to do is just divide this by 12, which equals our monthly goal of 10 closings. And that's okay for a place to start. But as you know your business better and you know how things are happening, you've got to look through your whole world and say, is this realistic right now? Because is there seasonality in our business? Yes. If you're a newer agent and you're just getting started, is it realistic that you're going to have to, let's say that we're right here in August and you just started. Is it realistic for you to have 10 closings this month if you got your license today?
No,
No, right? Is it realistic even next month?
possibly not.
Possibly not, right? So the reality is, this month, you would focus on the activities that are going to drive this, but your monthly goal probably wouldn't be 10 closed units. Your monthly goal would be something under contract, right? So maybe this would be that you're gonna add 300 people to your database this month. That might be your monthly goal, right? Because that's going to drive us towards the annual goal of 10 transactions a month. Is that making sense? Is that kind of tracking with what we're talking? So for just a basic, you can start with just taking your annual number and dividing it by 12. But then this is where we dive in and where the 411 really becomes impactful is when we're actually analyzing what we're doing with our 411 each week and taking the time each month to evaluate what needs to happen this month to continue pushing me forward. So a couple quick things when we're thinking about our weekly one, and then I'm going to go into like how we should evaluate this. Our weekly goals should not just be a to-do list. And most common, that's the mistake that we see is people want to just write everything that's to do in the week. What are the must do's in this week that's going to push you forward? What's the 20% that's going to get you 80% of your results? So, Allison, what are some examples of what you could do in a week for production? From a production standpoint, if you had a goal,
Lead generate,
okay,
follow up. Is that the kind of question you're asking?
yes, but I think just be a little, so you would want to be a little more specific. So
Oh,
if
yeah.
my weekly goal, so if my monthly goal is to close 10 transactions, 10 units closed for the month,
Sugar daddy.
then weekly, I'm gonna have 4 to 5 things that are most important for that to happen, to be able to push me forward, to continue this pipeline being full,
Make 25 calls.
right? So exactly, something like that would be make 25 calls a day.
Get 2 listings. Or whatever.
Yeah,
Set-
this might be, how
set
many
10
appointments do I need to go on each week, right? So maybe I need to set 3 appointments. And I need to actually hold 2 appointments. You guys are on the right track. What else could our weekly goals be that are gonna push us forward towards our monthly and annual goal? Like what would have to happen this week for that to happen? So these are a good start, and then you're gonna evaluate each week to say, well, what else, when I'm looking at my calendars, when you're closing your week, like what else needs to happen here? If these are always the most important 3, you may only need 3 things. Because if no matter what else happens, these things have to happen, it might be that you've made a commitment to hold an open house. You're gonna hold 1 open house a week,
Knock 100 doors.
knock 100 doors. Okay, so these are our weekly calls. This was our weekly appointments. Now you don't see anything on here like, check my contract for signatures. You don't see anything on here like, paperwork to the title company, schedule inspections. All of those things are important, right? Those all have to happen. Those are the pieces that could be leveraged if you had to have them though. These pieces right here are what you must do. They're the most important. If you're not doing these things, it's not going to hit your goal. You're not going to hit it, right? So when you're thinking that through, you still will have you can still have a to-do list, but it just doesn't belong on your 411. These are the very most important things for you to do this week. Okay, make sure that you're time blocking to evaluate if the results showed up and then what adjustments are going to need to be made. And then, so the way that this would do this, so is anybody a listener of the One Thing podcast? It's so good. Has everybody read this book?
Did you see that Nikki Miller is now posting it? Posting it? She's co-hosting. Oh, right. She's awesome.
I've read it, I need to reread it again. I don't remember.
This book is honestly so good. So this is just like a little diagram that shows you about your productive day versus everything else. Oh my gosh. So the whole premise of this book is what's the one thing that you can do that makes everything else easier or unnecessary. So you're taking it back to the very basic, like what's the one thing that you can do that makes everything else unnecessary. If you get really good at time blocking in a productive day, instead of your one thing getting a quarter of your time because you're chasing all these other little rabbits and you're doing all these things on your to-do list, and maybe you had a to-do list with 50 things on it. The reality is your to-do list is probably never going to get completely finished in a day. It's just not. So how are you prioritizing what's most important on your to-do list? Because what we tend to do is we do the things that are easiest for us or that we like to do more. And so our lead gen, our 25 calls get lost in the, oh, well, I just had to. Oh, I've got to do this. Oh, well, I needed to do this. Oh, well, I do. I lunch with that lender today. So I can't do my lead gen. I've got lunch. Right? Like we will make any excuse not to do the things that are most important. That's kind of what this whole one thing book is about. If you haven't read it lately, I would really highly suggest it.
Russie, couldn't you put in that 25 daily calls? You could put calls, texts, emails,
Contacts.
all,
You can call it whatever you want
anything,
to.
anything that generates more activity
Yeah.
when you talk to your clients.
And this is going to be what your goal is. So let's say that you had a goal that no matter what, every single week, you were going to have a conversation in some way with 100 people, right? So this could be 100 conversations for the week. And then you personally know of this mix, 25 of these are maybe going to be text, 50 are going to be follow-up calls or quarterly pair calls. 25 are going to be circle dialing around your open. Right? So whatever that looks like for you, you can have this be whatever you want. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So now at the end of each week, so in the one thing at podcast, and if you don't, so there is, it's called, there's a website, has tons of information on it, and it's called The One, and it actually has the one thing.com. This website, if you click on resources, it'll have like a fillable version of this, but it also has just a ton of resources. And the podcast of this is so good too. But the thing that they suggest on the podcast is schedule a 1 hour meeting with yourself. Do you need some help, Jess?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Schedule a 1 hour meeting with yourself every single week consistently that you're spending time. 30 minutes of it should be looking at what did you do. So that's evaluating the week that just ended. And 30 minutes should be prep for what's coming up next. So you can do this whenever you want. You guys have heard me use the term called close out my week.
So it's 30 minutes, what you.
30 minutes of evaluating how did you show up? So you're looking at your weekly tasks. And this is why I like this one, because I'm a color coder. Like I like to visually see.
Look, I'm over here like.
Yes, I visually like to be able to see.
Markers.
So on mine, you can see if it's green, it got done. If it's orange, I worked on it. If it's red, nothing happened. So that's how mine personally looks. Now, everybody's different and whatever works for you. And this was the other thing too, that the 4-in-1, I think is a really great tool and it makes it easy. But I'm a firm believer to do what you'll actually do. So if this format for you doesn't work, what are you going to use instead? Right? Because if you have a different format, that's fine, but you have to do something that's walking you through the same process essentially. So you've got your monthly goals, you've got your weekly goals, and your annual goals. And you can, if you get this and you don't want to do quarterly goals, you can just spit those out. But every week at the end of the week or the beginning of the week, however you want to do it, I have an appointment every Friday at 4 o'clock. And that's just my weekly prep meeting with myself. Every night at 9 o'clock, there's 15 minutes on my calendar that's just to close out my day. There's probably times you guys have gotten a text from me at like 9:10 that means I just closed out my day and I scrolled through my text and it was something that I had to respond to you by today. That I missed it. Yes, and I'm asking you for gift cards because I'm in an important meeting and I need you to go get them and send me pictures of them. Yes.
So you said 30 minutes, how did you show up? Evaluating and what was the other 30?
And then the next
Basically,
30
like,
minutes
prep.
is prep for the next week. So you're saying,
What worked and what needs to change?
yes, so if this was my week, and it was, I do mine on Fridays. I used to have it on Sundays, because I was kind of following like what Marcus's calendar does, and he has his on Sundays afternoon. And I found myself freaking dreading my phone making a sound at 1 PM on on Sundays, because that was the signal to me that I had to like walk in my office and shut the door. Well, my world is extremely busy all the time. My kids are busy, husband, like we're going a million different miles. Sunday is our day that like, we try not to do things if we don't have to. It's our day that we're home. So I found myself being so irritated that I had to walk in my office and plan for the next week. So my goal now is I want to have it prepped by Friday evening so that when I walk out Friday night, I already know what the next week needs to look like. So when I'm closing down my week, I'm truly closing it out. Now, this might for you be Saturday. It might be Sunday. You may love Sunday mornings with yourself to be able to sit and evaluate the week, reflect, whatever. And then the other question I always get about this is if you close it out on Friday, what happens with what happens over the weekend? You can do one of two things. It's your own, this is your own adventure. So you can add them into the next week as already done, or you can know that they're going to be done, but you just have to make the adjustments if you didn't do that. So for example, if you were going to door knock because you were short 20 houses on Saturday and you're closing your week out on Friday, you still need to add those 20 appointments, the 20 knocks you missed into the next week. So part of what I do when I'm closing out my week is I pull up the 4-1. Now, one thing, what do most people have in the background of their, like on their little open tabs most of the time? Your email. Most people have your email open. So what if you just got in the habit of having your 411 open too? So every time, because here's what happens is the minute that our brain starts to go a different direction, or we're tired of Legion, we have a big frog that we need to eat, but we're procrastinating eating it. What do? Click on our email because it's open. What does email do? Sucks your time. It sucks it away. You're now on somebody else's schedule, not your own. So if you have your 411 up just in the background instead, and every time, and some people actually like print it out, they actually do a physical 411 and it's just on their desk or where they can see it every day or at the front of their folder or whatever. So every time you started getting distracted, you pulled back up your 411 and you're like, oh, the most important things that I said I was going to do this week, these were my commitments. I was going to have 100 conversations. I was going to set 3 appointments. I was going to hold 2. I was going to do an open house and I was going to knock 100 doors. And then you evaluate kind of where you're at in the week. It's going to help you just remain and like suck back into the focus time. Now you should do this with every aspect of your life. So we have a business goal, a financial goal, an educational goal, and a personal goal. Now the educational goal, like you may not have something every single month that educationally you're working on, but mine oftentimes is like books that I'm reading, right? It's books I'm reading or a skill that I want to learn, or like mega camp was on my personal goal list for this month. On my educational list. And then personal for me is like who I want to make sure I'm spending one-on-one time with each of my kids every month. And so my kids, I divide these out. So these are the only ones that I'll fill out in advance on my weeks. So like if for the month, I know I want one-on-one time with each of my kids, but I know I already have a date scheduled with Addison on the 13th. I actually will pop ahead in that week so that I see her name on here and I kind of have a better plan of like where I'm going to juggle that. Right, so this might be totally filled out on the personal side because I know what I'm doing there. Or if you have fitness goals, that might be there that you go, okay, this is what I need to do this week in order to do that. I always think on your personal side, like if you're prepping to run a marathon, like Haley right now is prepping to run. Well, if you've ever run any distance, you know you have a tracker that tells you how many miles you have to run each day and then what your long runs are. That would very much belong in your weekly goals. But I wouldn't fill those out the whole week because what happens if I don't run my 10-mile long run the week of the 3rd through the 7th like I'm supposed to? I still got to fit my long run in somewhere, right? So that would maybe have to fall into the next week. So it's Friday night, I'm sitting down and I have to evaluate what I did this week. So that appointment on your calendar with yourself, This says 1 hour. I think the more efficient you get at it, you don't really need a full hour for it. That's my personal opinion. Particularly if you're kind of like closing out your day at the end of each night, you probably have a pretty good idea of where you're at. At the end of the week or the beginning of the week, wherever you're gonna do it, you have time blocked on your calendar and it has to be there. Because otherwise this gets lost. 411 is hard to stay consistent with. So if you have the appointment with yourself, first of all, you're gonna pull up your 411 and you're gonna look at it and you're gonna say, how did I do this week? And if you like color coding, you can color code or you can do whatever you want. So I'm gonna look and say, okay, conversations, how many conversations did I have? Now you're gonna have to go to wherever you're tracking these. So if you're tracking them in Sisu, you should be able to quickly pull up wherever you're tracking them. If you're tracking them like
Could you put
this,
them in command even?
yep, if you're tracking them in command, if you're tracking them on your whiteboard, whatever it is, at this point, you're gonna look and you're gonna add up and say, okay, my goal was to have 100 conversations. I'm gonna add them up and I'm like, oh, I actually only had 75 conversations. So this would turn orange for me because I worked on it, but I didn't hit it yet. So I already know I have a little shortage here. And then set 3 appointments. So this is gonna be really easy to know if you set 3 appointments, because what are you gonna do? You're gonna look at your calendar or you're gonna look at command and where are people out in the pipeline. If you have people in appointment set, you know that you have those appointments set. Did you set them this week or did you set them last week? You should have a pretty good idea of what appointments you set. So I'm gonna look at this and say, oh, I did okay on this. I set 2 appointments for next week. So that's still orange. Hold 2 appointments. I held 2 appointments. Again, you're looking at your calendar, right? So I'm like, oh, good. I find myself, I held both my appointments. This might even have in here like 1 contract signed. Then open house. Did I hold my open house? Did we hold our open house or did we need to get a different date?
We held it.
We held it. Yes. We held our open house. We got that done. Good job. Did we knock 100 doors?
Oh, did you not?
We knocked 100?
No, let's say 95.
We knocked, we only knocked 95. So we did 95 doors. But we worked on it.
So Russie, if you know during that month that one of those weeks that you're gonna be doing something different,
Yes.
you would say, I'm doing 2 open houses this week and I can't do it next week, so I've got my open houses that I planned on. I just moved it to a different week, so it'll flow through.
You're
the rest
jumping
of the
ahead. This is
No.
what she's gonna do.
Sorry.
No, but this is 100% what your evaluation should look like. So you already know your year goals, but then at the end of the month, like the last week of the month, you should also be sitting down and looking at your 411 and looking at your monthly goals for the month before and doing this exact same process, but for the month. And you should be having your calendar open. So like the time blocking portion in this talks about blocking your time. Vacation times are important. Does anybody want to be saying, oh, family, hold on, I've got to go and hurry and quickly make 100 phone calls. I'll be at the beach in a little bit. Do you guys want to do that?
I think that's why Russie too, like she said, she likes this with the tab because like if you know, when you have that whole year laid out and you know, like in October, we do this for this week, in November, this is like absolutely, we're not doing anything. You've already got those so that when you're going through and you're doing your monthly goals and your quarterly goals, you're gonna take that into effect and you're gonna adjust your weekly goals.
So the month of July for me, I always know is it's a slower month for all my lead gen activities. Because the way my husband's world works, he has to ask for time off in advance. So he always has a chunk of time and I don't go the whole time that they go camping, but like I always know I'm gonna take at least a week and a half off, sometimes 2 weeks in July. And so that is like, I'll pop forward to July and in my personal side, I'll put the vacation dates that I'm here. Or like Jed and I do our goal setting retreat in October. So I'll already have that in my personal month. I'll have like, if you put to October, it would say personal goal setting retreat with Jed. Right, so then as soon as I hit on October, because I'm going to plan it, I'm like, oh, I've got my goal setting retreat. Well, as long as you're paying attention, and I think you should be kind of looking at your calendar as a whole. So if you're looking at that, and let's say this week you're taking a vacation.
Or like my mega camp week was basically blank except mega camp.
Yeah, so if I know that instead of 4 weeks to accomplish my monthly goal, I actually only have 3. You're absolutely right. You're gonna go through and say, well, I need to still make the 400 conversations because that's what I knew I had to do in order to hit my goals this month. But I don't want to make calls this week. So this week, I would say try to front load, like try to get it done before, because when you're on vacation, it never ever fails. that as soon as you plan a vacation and you're like in the airport, you're like about to get on the plane and it's like,
She gets busy.
can I go, can somebody go show it? So your world will blow up when you plan a vacation. So if you front load before you go, whether that's kind of spreading it over the month, the whole month before you go, or a couple weeks before you go, it's gonna make it easier to not feel like you're having to work when you're actually trying to be off for these pieces. Right,
Or
so
if you
yeah,
get into vacation mode that week before, then you're really like not trying to dig yourself out the next 2 weeks.
exactly, yes, 100%. So yeah, you would just take that and you would say, okay, well, I actually have a goal this week. And sometimes if there's little reminders or something like that, I'll add those in, because I always say, like, don't ever fill out your whole week at one time. But if there's things that I know, like, okay, I'm used to making 100 calls a week, but I actually have to make 150 these first 2 weeks, then I'll put those in there just so that I know that as a reminder to myself of what I need to do. Contract signed. Did we get our contract signed? Oh, yes, we did. We're not walking out of that appointment without a contract signed. In fact, we got 2 contracts signed. Woo! That's the little purple. So we actually got 2 signed here. Okay, so now I'm starting to plan my next week. And next week actually isn't vacation. But if it was, I would skip this and I would move things forward here. But from here, I'd say, okay, well, these were the things that I determined I had to do. And I actually was short 75 conversations. So now I'm gonna have a conversation with myself and say, can I make 125 calls this week or have 125 conversations? If I feel like it's realistic, I can. If you're way behind, like let's say that was a vacation week, you need to increase that. So you need to say like, okay, well, or I mean, you need to spread it out. So let's say I was way behind in my 100 conversation goal, I made 10 conversation goals. I've got 90. That's a big gap to make up in 1 week. It's setting me up to fail. If I say to myself, I only made 10 conversations and I had a goal of 100, and now next week I have to make 190, am I gonna do it? Probably not, right? You might, depending on how motivated you are. For most people, I'm gonna say they won't. Most people
125.
are gonna say 190 is too much, but I can do 125, that's doable. And then next week I'll have to make up some more, and then the next week I'll have to make up some more. So my goal for this next week, this is why we don't just fill them all in at one time, because my goal this week now is 125 conversations, because I didn't hit all my conversations. And I know I have to set 3 appointments every single month, but you know what, I actually only got 2 set for the next week. So, I mean, every single week. So how many appointments do I need to set this week? Now I have to set 4. Because I need 3, no matter what, to stay on track. And I was short 1. So I've got to set 4 appointments this week. Hold 2 appointments, I did that. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna still just hold those 2 appointments. Because I got these 2 set, hopefully I'm gonna hold them both. I'm gonna do an open house, but actually I have an opportunity to do 2 open houses, and my kid's birthday is next Saturday. So I'm gonna hold 2 open houses. So next week, I'm not gonna have an open house in my 411. Knock 100 doors, I only did 95. What am I gonna do?
105.
I'm gonna knock 105 doors. Because at the end of the month, this all is gonna funnel up to here. And if I just keep falling short and I'm not making up for it along the way, then that's gonna be a problem. And then I need to get 2, I got 2 contracts signed because both the appointments I went on, they both signed. So technically, I don't have to have any contracts signed this week, but I know I already have these 2 appointments set. So I'm just gonna go back to I need 1 contract, because guess what? I'd rather have an extra contract signed than not enough. But that's up to you. If you have a vacation coming up and you got your contracts done here, then you still get this one, and then this week's a vacation, then you know that you're already still on track for 3 appointments in 3 weeks. Does that make sense? So that's kind of what you're doing to evaluate the week. Then you would do the same thing at the end of the next week. You're looking at it and you're saying, how did I do on my goals? You're setting your calendar. From here, this point, so now we've gotten it into our 411. So our week 2 is filled out now. So now we're saying, okay, we've got our goals for the 10th to 14th. Where does this go now? It's beautiful on our 411. What do we need to do to it? If it's not in your calendar, it doesn't exist. So now you have to go time block. This is part of your Friday meeting with yourself, or whatever day you want to do your meeting. This is part of your weekly meeting. You're going to say, from here, where does it fit in my calendar? If you don't put it in your calendar, you will never do it. Learn to live and die by your calendar. If it's not in your calendar, it doesn't exist. I finally, you guys, I feel like this is a pretty major accomplishment, so I'm gonna share it with you. I finally have Jed and Addison subscribed to my family calendar. Really big deal. Because for a long time, they would never know when anything was, and they would say, hey, now it's coming up, and I said, check the calendar. Now they're both subscribed to my family calendar, and it makes it so much easier, because they see, like, on my calendar, I use Google Calendar, whatever you guys want to do. The reason I like that one is because I have, like, my personal business is linked to a different calendar and a different email versus my office versus my family. And so, like, my family calendar is orange on my calendar. This office calendar is like blue. My personal calendar is purple. So at a quick glance, I can see, like, oh, I have something coming up and it's orange. I know I have a family event that night, right? So however you want to do that, but you have to add these things into your time block. So if you have your 2 appointments already set, they should already be on your time block. If you didn't, let's say that you had 3 appointments that you plan to hold, but you only have 2 on your calendar, you can add in an appointment. You can just say listing appointment. And it doesn't have an address or a name attached to it yet, because I gotta find somebody to fill this spot. Gary Keller, if you ever listen to anything of his with time blocking, his whole thing is, if you must erase, you must replace. It makes it easier if it's a Google Calendar, because you can just pick it up and move it somewhere else, but you can't just delete it, you have to move it somewhere else. So if you had a goal to hold 2 appointments a week, you should have 8 appointments on your calendar. You just don't know who holds it yet, or where they're gonna go yet. So you have to take these activities and you gotta time block them. Because if you don't have the time blocked for them, you're not gonna do them. So make sure your open houses are on your calendar, your door knocking should be on your calendar, your conversation, this is your lead gen time, should be on your calendar. Your contract might be during your lead follow-up time. Does this make sense? Now, at the end of the month, we're doing just like what you were talking, Wes. So at the end of the month, now we look at our whole month as a whole, and we're looking at all 4 weeks. And we're looking at our monthly goal, and we're saying, did we accomplish what we set out to accomplish each week? And we've evaluated every week. Now we look at the monthly goal. We say, did the activities show up in the way we thought they would? And if we didn't hit our monthly goal, what do we need to do?
Yeah, the beauty of that too, I think, is it goes both ways. Like you can come to the end of it and say, what the hell was I thinking? There's no way I can make 100 conversations. It's not gonna happen. I need to be more realistic with my goal and adjust it that way. Or you can say, holy shit, I'm actually got 12 appointments each week because I'm doing 100. I need to change my goals because I shouldn't be setting myself up to fail at 3.
100%, right? This is the beauty of it, and every week and every month evaluating it, because I actually think most of the time, well, not most of the time, I think a lot of times an annual goal sounds good. And then the activities that it takes to actually achieve the annual goal starts to feel right? And we overestimate what we can do, but we also underestimate sometimes what we can do, right? Because if you're truly consistent with that, and out of 100 calls, you're consistently getting 4 appointments, and you're converting 3 of the appointments versus 4 into a contract, then you're going to be way ahead on your goals. And that doesn't mean just like, oh, cool, I just get to take the month off, unless you plan to take the month off, and so you're front loading the year. And you're setting yourself up for success if you know that you're consistently doing the same things. Most of the time with real estate agents business, we see it go like this, like nothing, peak, nothing, peak, nothing, peak. Why?
You get busy and you slow down.
We stop the activities. We stop doing these things that we know are important. So we start servicing the client, and we focus all of our energy here, and then we're like, oh crap. And then we got to start lead generating again. And so it takes us like 30 to 60 days here to build our pipeline back up. And then we close, but instead of learning from what we did the 2 months before, we're like, oh yes, thank God, I finally have something under contract. And you focus all of your energy right here, and you forget about the daily habits that you have to do that got there. When you see people start to consistently be consistently sell homes, there's always some seasonality. But when you see the consistency, it's somebody who's consistently lead generating. It doesn't matter what's happening in the market, because they're consistently talking to people, consistently lead generating. They've got blinders on to the fact that in December there's snow on the ground and nobody wants to move. Yet it tends to actually be one of our busiest months at the office.
This was a common conversation for the top agents that they brought on stage too during mega camp. They're like, when you get busy, do not slow down. It's gonna get hectic, it's gonna get crazy, keep pushing, and that's why they're the way where they're at. I mean, once you get to that point where you're probably gonna go psycho, then leverage comes into play and you continue to grow your business.
Exactly.
Otherwise,
And I think adopting the whole concept of like the should-do list compared to the to-do list early on is really gonna help with that too, because you're gonna have to start getting good about prioritizing what actually is gonna make a difference really fast when you do
because I've already been there twice, like, I'm like, oh crap, I'm so crazy busy, and I'm like, pause everything, like, turn it, like, I can't take on anymore, and then you're like, oh wait, what's next? Oh, crap. Oh crap,
Something in the
yeah.
pipeline. Yep. And the other thing that's good about evaluating it, so let's say that we were looking at October as the month instead of January. If you're participating in the pumpkin patch event, that's probably there should probably be some monthly goals set around a pumpkin patch event. Right? So your monthly goal should be 50 people to attend the pumpkin patch event, or however many people you have that you want to plan to have there. And then I would say even like part of your weekly goals will be invites to that, right? Or follow up with that, or asking for referrals from that. But just thinking and kind of having that planned out, that's why I like the quarterly in there too, versus just the annual and the monthly. Because if I have quarterly that I'm gonna have a pumpkin patch event that I have 100 people at and 3 referrals from, every single month I start seeing that. If that's in October, I would actually probably put that in the month before as like your prep for it. Because then July, August, and September, I keep seeing like pumpkin patch invites, pumpkin patch invites, pumpkin patch invites. So then when October rolls around, it's probably gonna be more successful because I was prepping and planning for it in advance through my goal.
Plus, if you do that, you get it out there so they can put it on their calendar early. And by talking to them ahead of time.
Yeah.
And you know that they're gonna show up.
Yeah.
And then you just follow up with them up until the very end, until they show up.
And that should be part of your weekly, that could be part of your weekly conversations.
Yep.
That can be like one of your major goals that week. Can be the pumpkin patch invites.
Or you might have
dropping
to
something
remove
off.
some goals in order to fit those things in.
Yes, and if you have to remove something, so if I know that that's gonna happen, and on Saturday, I decided that it's more important for me to go, I'm gonna do personalized invites to my top 20 people, and I'm gonna take them a pumpkin to invite them. Is that gonna take probably more time than you have in a Saturday if you're trying to do an open house too? Yes, it will. So I might have to adjust my goals and say, well, first week, actually, I'm gonna go take the pumpkin invites, so I can't hold an open house. That means next week I have to have 2 open houses. Does that make sense? So you're pushing things forward and just adjusting them. This is why you can't just say, like in a perfect world, you could just go, 12-month goal is this, I'm gonna divide it by 12, and then every week I'm gonna divide it by 4, and voila, the results will show up, right? It's just the consistency of doing it and really mapping and planning. Same thing with your personal goals. Like I think a good example of this is like if you're trying to eat healthier or work out or whatever. And if you go from 0, like you're sitting on the couch watching Netflix every night, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, tomorrow's the day. It's broccoli and grilled chicken, no salt seasonings, and I'm working out for an hour, 7 days a week.
That ain't happening.
What's gonna happen the first time somebody walks in with donuts in the office and you have gone from 0 sitting on the couch watching Netflix, door dashing to day 1, you're setting yourself up to fail. So this is where like the consistency of the 4-in-1, like maybe first week, it's just like actually like the podcast that I just listened to about the one thing was like, maybe the first week, it's actually just every day at lunch, putting your shoes on so that you could go for a walk if you choose to during your lunch break. And then you're consistently putting your, and you will go for a walk some of the time.
Shoes off.
Well, you don't like your work shoes, you weirdo, like your workout shoes, weirdo.
She never ran her heels, okay?
The example that she gave was if you've never worked out before and suddenly you say, I'm gonna go run every day for 1 hour in the middle of the day on my lunch break. Chances are you might do it once or twice, but you're not gonna do it 7 days that week. But if you make the goal of like, no matter what, I'm putting on my shoes and I'm walking outside, maybe I'm gonna walk 3 walks around the track. Maybe I'm gonna go for 30 minutes, and you can build up to it. And that's how you're gonna be able to track it. So you can look at that, and when you're ending the week, say, gosh, you know what? I had a goal this week to walk for a total of X amount of minutes and I did it. Or I had a goal to go to the gym X amount of days and I did it. And it just is kind of depending on where it fits in throughout your week day. That makes sense? And then you see where you're going, see your progress. What like real world applications do you guys have questions on?
Live by your calendar.
I like to link my 411 into my close out my week, like on the calendar, like I just link it right to the Google Calendar
Oh, yeah, because then you file
File.
right there. When do you close out your week?
on Fridays.
Fridays?
I can't do it on the weekend. Doesn't work.
Me either. I don't want to be focusing on that on the weekend. What'd you say?
I was gonna talk.
Yeah, so linking it to your calendar, honestly, I really do think the better you get at looking at your calendar and following your calendar, it just keeps things more consistent. Because it's easy to go, oh, I will lead generate, I'm just gonna find a place to do it. And I'm also a believer of like, lead generate when it works for you, and I know that's opposite of what everything else says, but, and it is true, like your willpower fades throughout the day. But if you find that you're more energized at 2 p.m. than you are at 9 a.m., and that's a better time for you to make calls, or you get more responses at 5 p.m. and you like to start your morning in a different way, like it's okay to do it different times, but it has to be consistent, and it has to be in your calendar. So it can't be, I'll fit it in sometime today, right? It has to be in the calendar. And if something happened that you absolutely had to move it for, like there are things that come up, right? If something happened that you have to move it, just move it somewhere in the same day and move it somewhere that you know you're going to do it. I see this one a lot with people that will say like, oh, well, I don't have time in the morning to do this, so I'll do it in the evening. Well, in the evening at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., are you excited about getting on the phone and calling people? Your willpower's gone. You've been using your brain all day. Or are you excited to go to the gym at 8:30 at night when you get home? No, right? And some people are. So if some people are excited, do it. If that's what works for you, if that energizes you, like if Wes, if you're like, oh yes, I love going to the gym at 9 p.m. Go at 9 p.m. But just know that it's harder as the day goes on to use will call. If in the One Thing book, I know I keep talking about the One Thing book, but in the One Thing book, it talks about if you picture your willpower like a battery on a phone. So at the beginning of the day, your fully charged cell phone battery and it's green and it looks pretty and it's fully charged. And then as the day goes on, it starts to shrink. And then what happens once you hit 20%? Like you get a red alert that pops up and says, you're at 20% battery life. Do you want to go into low power mode? And then you click low power mode because you're like, oh crap, I don't have a charger or whatever. And I got to keep going throughout the day. And so you click into low power mode and it goes yellow and it powers everything down. So it's only sending you the most important things. That's what happens to your brain at the end of the day too. Or it's red. If you don't go into low power mode, it's like, danger, danger, you're fading fast, right? So your battery isn't just instantly rechargeable like that. And you might have things throughout the day that recharge you. Maybe that's where that afternoon walk comes in. Maybe that makes you feel energized to get outside, do a walk, whatever. And that refuels your battery. It's like plugging your battery back in and then you get into lead gen. But the reason they have you do lead gen at first thing in the morning and why it should be in your calendar first thing is because that's when your battery should be the highest. It's full. You just pulled it off the charger. You should have just gotten a good night's sleep. So now your battery's full and you're ready to go. As your battery depletes throughout the day, it's harder and harder to have good willpower. It would have been way harder for me if I had been here at 8 o'clock last night to not have those donuts versus when it was at noon and I had just had a protein bar and I was like, I don't want the donut. I want it, but I'm not going to eat. Right? So it's just your willpower and where you're at for the day. Other tips and tricks, I think, honestly, it helps to have somebody that's doing it with you. Like if you share your Form 1, like with these templates, if you have it shared with somebody, like mine is shared with my coach. So I know that my coach at any given time is going to pull up my Form 1 and see, hey, did I do it? And I'll tell you what, like even myself, I've been in this habit for a long time. It's still like I get off track, like Mega Camp Week threw me way off. I was gone right before Mega Camp Week. So I was like gone, Mega Camp Week came back. Like it's taken me a minute to get back on track with that, but it's shared with my coach. So I know at any given moment, she can pull this up and look at it and see like, did she do the Form 1? She knows my color coding too. So she's going to be like, there is a lot of red in your week, Russie. And because I'd mark it red if I didn't even touch it. And then here's the other thing. If something stays red consistently for me, like I'll notice red sometimes in certain areas and I'm like, this clearly is not that important for me to do because it's red for 2 weeks straight now, or it's red for 3 weeks straight now. So it makes me start to go a little bit internal and evaluate and say, like, is that really the most important thing that I should be doing? Because if I haven't even looked at it, if I've made zero progress on it, is it really important? And maybe it's still important, but maybe it needs to be pushed forward into the next quarter.
Or maybe there's a
Or
different
maybe
way to
it's-
do it.
Or maybe there's a different way that I need to accomplish it. Right? So being realistic with yourself, I think, is really important. Realistic, not complacent. Right? Because complacency also is not gonna, if you just are like, well, on average, I make about 10 calls a week. So I'm just gonna do that because that's realistic. You're not pushing yourself at that. That's 2 calls a day. You make
Technically
20.
not a goal if you're already doing it,
If
right?
you're already doing it, you're right. It's not even something that you
Should
really
be
need
on-
to
should
be
be on
paying
there.
attention.
So if you're already doing it consistently, you think you take it off the.
I don't
one?
I
even
don't
though-
think so. If it's something that's
If
that
it's
you
one
have to
thing, yeah.
continue doing. to
If
your
it's
goal,
one of
I
the
don't think you should
20%.
take it off.
It's like one of the.
If it's one of your 20%, I think it should stay on there. If you picture things on your Form 1 as your top 20% that has to get done, the 100 conversations probably have to get done. But if you're like crushing 100 and it's no big deal to you, you can make a decision at that point. Maybe I'll push to 110. What would it look like if I did 125? Or you might just say like, here I'm at, here's where I'm at, I'm comfortable, and maybe you're not converting. So you say, well, I can continue having the conversations, but I need to work on my conversion because I'm going on the appointments, but I'm not getting the contracts signed. Right? It's kind of like following your numbers like you do in coaching. It helps you see where your gaps are. I'm trying to think if there was any other tips with the Form 1, but having somebody else either share it with somebody else or even like that closeout meeting. Like if you know somebody else, like if all of you guys had your closeout meeting Friday at 4 and you got in the habit of like, hey, every Friday at 4, I'm going to text you when I'm opening up that appointment link to get my 401 pulled up. Now I know that Allison's working on hers and I'm working on mine. Right? So the accountability, I think, is huge in this scenario. I really think that's it. Is there anything else that you guys have questions on or that was unclear or that you want to talk through? A couple just other quick little tips. Make sure that you're specific on what these are. So instead of, if you just had on here conversations and you don't have a number to it, or more conversations, but you don't have a number to it, then how do you know if you achieved it? Or like, in the personal, if you had a goal to like lose weight or get healthy, like what does that look like? Am I healthier if I chose a salad one day over the donut? Did I hit my goal? Woo, and I'm gonna achieve, right? So be specific, like how are you gonna measure your healthiness? Personal one last year was the hard one for me to like, how am I gonna measure it? Because I really was feeling like I needed more quality time with my family and friends. And how was I gonna measure that? Right, so my annual goal now became like one-on-one time, X amount of times a month with everybody. Like, and I had my people kind of measured out on there. So
Should be a SMART goal.
a SMART goal, yes. Tell us what SMART stands for.
It's specific, measurable, attainable, I think realistic and time.
Yes. Good job. So like, even on financial, like one of my goals this year was my passive income goal, right? So I had to have like increase my passive income goal by X amount. And so then each month I had to figure out how was that passive income goal gonna happen? Is that gonna be an investment property? Is that gonna be another investment? Is that gonna be like, what is my passive income goal gonna look like and how? My passive income goal each year has to increase in order for me to get to a point that I can retire. Right? But if I just say passive income, create passive income opportunity, then I don't have a measurable amount to say, well, right now I need to increase my passive income in the next 5 years by X%. Then I don't know that. The one thing does go deeper into like knowing your someday goals, like 5-year, 10-year someday, 1 year. And then so that in your 1-year goal, you kind of already have those someday goals figured out. And your 5-year goal, for example, because there might be a time where like in your 5-year goal, there's a specific thing that you want to have happen. But if it comes up this year, are you trying to help prepare so that you know it happens, right? Like my someday goal is a family cabin. But if I don't put that out there all the time and always have that in the back of my head, like that might come up this year. That might be a good way of like, when we're talking about if we need to, like, if we're looking at it and at the beginning of the year, we said, okay, we're gonna save, 25% for our down payment on family cabin or whatever. It comes up and we can do it for 5%, that's just the exact right deal, like whatever, right? So you're just adjusting based on those things. That's where your annual goal would change. Any other questions? The one thing that I was gonna share with you out of another thing on this book is the 4 thieves of productivity, the inability to say no. The fear of chaos, because when you're busy and things are moving, there will be chaos in your world. It's how do you control the chaos, more, Sean? And I actually had a conversation about that this morning. Of like, I know there's always a certain level of chaos in my world. When I start to feel out of control is when my chaos doesn't feel like it's controlled chaos. Poor health habits, that's a thief of productivity, and an environment that doesn't support your goals. This one, I mean, I'll be totally honest and vulnerable, is like when I first started in real estate, I feel like Jed supported my goals to a certain level. And then as I grew and grew and grew, it was becoming a divide between us. And I had to really be like, I need you to dream bigger. I need you to, because I wasn't in an environment that was supporting these big dreams, right? It was like, I'm dreaming over here of this big, amazing life I want to have. And he's like,
You don't have a guaranteed paycheck coming in for, like, yeah,
right?
I get those same things.
Yeah, yeah. And it was, so I really had to just be like, I got like, whole along, like, you have to dream bigger. We can't dream only right here anymore. We have to dream bigger. And even if we don't get to the freaking Taj Mahal or whatever the hell I want to build, right? Do we get something close? So that I think is a huge one, the environment that doesn't support your goals. And I think this is in a lot of areas. I think it's in relationships. I think it's in, and that could be like a love relationship, a friendship, like
Family.
you'll grow friends, family environment, your work environment, your coaching environment. Like, does your environment support your goals? That's big to me, right? So those 4 thieves of productivity, the inability to say no is always the hard one. And that one is Darren Hardy. What? That's my week. Darren Hardy, I saw him live in Vegas one year. Have you guys read The Compound Effect?
And I've done his.
Oh, have you done the Insane Productivity?
Insane, I still haven't seen productivity. It's pretty intense.
It is pretty intense. We should do a challenge around that. That'd be fun. It is intense. But anyway, the compound effect, by the way, works both positive and negative. Like, compound effect is like the idea of like everyday compounding, and then it just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds, but by little steps. Well, it can be the same way for things that are bad. Like, you stay home and watch Netflix one night, and then the next night you decide you're going to again instead of going for the gym, and then the next night and the next night, not
And then pretty soon you're staying up all night watching.
pretty soon you're binge watching and you're not sleeping. Yeah. But when I saw him in Vegas, and it might have been in one of his books too, but one of the things that he said is, if I can't say hell yes, like hell yes, I'm so excited, and I know I'll figure, like, I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I said hell yes to it because I'm so excited about it. You have to say no. And that would like, and you hit points in your life where if you're saying yes to everything, pretty soon your calendar's out of control. You have everyone else's objectives in your life and on your calendar, but you're not living by your own things that you wanted to do. Because you're saying yes to everything else.
So wait, you said what?
If I can't say hell yes, if I can't say hell yes, I have to say no. So if Allison says to me, hey, can you do whatever? And I'm just like, yeah, I can do it. And I'm trying to figure it out. But I already know I can't. I already know I don't have time. I'm going to have to try to squish it in. And I'm like, well, I'll still be sad if I don't do that. And so I'm just going to say yes. So you say yes out of obligation instead of if she says something to me and I'm like, hell yes. And in my head, I still know I don't have time to do it. And what am I going to have to move or shift or drop or whatever? But if you have passion and you're excited about it, then it makes saying yes easier. And it also makes saying no to the other things easier.
Oh, that's self-honoring versus self-abandonment.
Yes, I love that. Yep, that's great. Self-honoring versus self-abandonment. Because we'll let ourselves down a lot when we say yes to other people, and we're really like letting ourselves down on the things that we said we were going to do. Right? So we can't say hell yes. We have to say no. Okay, awesome. Anything else I can do for you guys today? 15 minutes over. Sorry. Was this helpful?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Wait,
Always helpful.
are you gonna do a 411?
Yes, I am. I feel like I'm at a point now too, like where anxiety and chaos would probably be like 30% of what it currently is if this was in place. And I
You've
would
got that
truly,
in check a lot. You learned through
I
your
do,
chaos and anxiety.
I do. Like I just drive in that too, and that's what I'm used to previously, but
Yeah.
it's just like, it doesn't need to be there.
Well, and I do too, and this is the thing that's interesting, is I think it's an entrepreneurial trait too, but I also think as high achievers, we like get into the mindset of, I can do that, and I used to always be like, oh, I thrive in the chaos, right? And I do think that there is a certain amount of chaos that is like good for me, because it keeps me on my toes, keeps me energized. It what?
Keeps.
I just
the
don't
fire
like
lit.
the fire with.
Yeah, it keeps me energized, right? So I'm used to being able to operate in that, but that's when I was like, it's the controlled chaos for me. So I still know like what's on my calendar, I'm still in control of. What I said yes to, I'm still in control of. What I have planned, I'm still in control of, right? So it's kind of that controlled chaos versus just chaos. The other thing that I always think of, and actually this has been like in my mind so much lately, because everything we do, this is on a totally, so feel free to leave and it's on a totally different track. But I feel like right now the world is like, you're moving at warp speed because you have so many things that you have to do. So I was thinking about this, and I'm like, every audible I listen to, I listen at least 1.5 times, sometimes 2 if the person talks slow. Podcast, I listen to 1.75 or 2, depending on the speed of their voice, right? Like we've sped up everything in our lives. And I was like, I feel like I sped up everything in my life because I'm speeding up the pace at which I listen to things and the way that I'm moving constantly. And I'm like, well, it's no wonder that it's a blur. And I feel like we should still be in March and we're actually at the end of August because everything in my life is on double speed. So like, what do you have to do to like step back and really recognize and be in those moments? So I've been trying to be more cautious. I've been trying to be way more aware of that because I also feel like I'm speeding through everything like
That's more important.
that's more important that I should be slowing down to really take the time to enjoy it, right? Like I'm speeding through it to try to just like get to the other side because I have in my head all this chaos that's happening. And so it's like, instead of taking the time to sit down and like really enjoy dinner and ask my kids about their day, I'm like trying to rush through it because I know I have a list of things that I said I would get done today that I made commitment for, right? So I'm just trying to be more mindful of that because like, what if the world, like the universe itself, because everybody was listening to everything on 1.5 times, that really that's very tiny. That really it's like move forward quicker because as a society, we're just
Well, I call it being on tech pace, instead of nature pace.
Well, you
So
see,
like when you have to check yourself, to come back, that's why like nature is really helpful, or when you're in the 90s. Like,
Yeah.
what would I be doing and what would be my pace if there
Yes.
were no phone?
And
Like,
sometimes
like,
you're stuck back
counting,
with things.
You did the gas station instead of card, I can't go fast enough, like, like different things like that.
yes, for sure. You had a comment?
I'm doing the 401 one, and this has helped me. I have it. This is gonna help me to dial it down to make it more useful for me to see it and understand where it has to be on a daily basis, weekly basis, whatever, and my goals. Allison's been really good with that, so she's been very helpful.
Yeah.
And then I think when you talk about this speed,
Mhm.
just get on the freeway. Why in the hell do you have to go that fast? Where are you going that you've got to go that fast?
You don't have a choice. If you go 60, you're.
Okay, you know what I'm saying? What is rush? What are you rushing to? That when you get to that stoplight, I was going 70, you were going 100, and we're at the same stoplight.
The exact same place. True story. I was on the freeway the other night. I can't remember where I was coming home from, but it was late and I was coming home from Salt Lake and there was a car that was just like, I was like, he is gonna freaking kill somebody because he was like, like in and out of everybody and clear ahead. And I got off the exit and it was right in front of me.
And you're like.
Your life and like
everybody-
8 other vehicles. And it was late at night. I don't see great in the dark, so I wasn't even. I mean, I was driving the speed limit, but like, I wasn't going a million miles an hour. And I'm like, you put so many people in jeopardy because if one person wouldn't have been paying attention to you zipping in front of them, and they hit you, like somebody's life could be over. And we're literally going to reach our destination within 30 seconds of each
The worst is when you do that yourself, and then
Yeah.
you're like, oh shit.
You're like,
Did I really just do all this and like,
and here I am. Oh, hi. I just
Well,
cut you off
yeah.
earlier.
I've been there.
And you've been
I've been there, and then you're- like,
Yeah, for sure.
Wait, did you have something you were gonna say?
I was just gonna say, it's funny to me, like, that I sit and stress about trying to track things and keep stuff, and like, my calendar stresses me out, like, trying to. It just does, and then I'm like, I just don't do it, and then, but, like, this funnels into your calendar.
It totally does.
It keeps track of your conversations, it keeps track of your conversion rates, like. If you just focus on your goals and hold yourself